Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. The New York Knicks have about $5 million to spend. Taxpayer mid-level exception. I'll get into what that is and who they could potentially spend that money on right now.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today, I'm getting into the taxpayer mid-level exception, what it is, who the Knicks can spend it on. So let's start with what it is first. So the mid-level exception, what exceptions are in the NBA is basically ways for you to circumvent the salary cap. So the Knicks are over the cap, so they're over the what's called the soft cap, which is around 100 and I forget the number this year, 140 something million, something like that. But so that once you're over the cap, then you can still add to your team by using these exceptions that the league offers. So if you're a non-tax paying team, you can, which the luxury tax starts at around 160 million roughly this year. So if you're a non-tax paying team, you get slightly more money to spend over the cap. It's like $8 million to spend on players. Then if you're a tax team, you get a $5 million exception, which is basically the league saying, okay, yeah, you can use this small extra chunk of change. It's like a little more than a minimum contract. In this case, depending on the years of service for the player, probably about double a minimum contract or 1.5 for like some particularly long in the tooth veterans, because their minimum contract goes up year over year. But basically it allows you to just spend a little bit extra money to try to fill out your roster and, go potentially try to win a championship, maybe in the case of the Knicks. So I figured I'll go over some of the candidates that are still left in free agency right now. And some of these guys might actually be, it might be kind of shooting kind of high, if I'm being honest. Like these are guys that were either projected to make more money or guys that have made more money already at different points in their career. Like, they're guys that if they end up taking this contract, you go, ooh, I mean, I wonder if maybe something's gone wrong for this guy, that he's taking this money. But, we've already seen, for example, Cody Martin take a deal with the Sixers that was significantly less than what people thought he was going to get with the Heat, and what he was offered by the Heat. And he kind of tried to like bet on himself, and then it just didn't work out. And there just wasn't a market for him. The teams with actual cap space are dwindling at this point. So there's actually only I think 6 teams in the league right now that can give more than this $5 million that the Knicks have at their disposal and that some other teams have at their disposal. And that would be like the Jazz, Detroit, San Antonio. So 3 tanking teams or 3 teams that, maybe San Antonio tries to get better this year just to start maximizing Wemby's prime as quick as possible, or start maximizing, just what he brings to the table as soon as possible. But then you have Orlando and Charlotte and OKC that have $8 million that they can spend because they have a non-taxpayer mid-level exception that they can use. But otherwise, it's kind of like, it's the Knicks and some other teams that have $5 million that they can spend. So, some of these guys will probably be available with that amount of money. It's just a matter of, will they come to the Knicks where they maybe won't have a role carved out right away, or do they want to go to a more guaranteed situation with some other team? The first guy that I'll bring up is Saddiq Bey. And he's, again, kind of overqualified, I think, for this general salary spot, but averaged 14 points, 6.5 boards, 1.5 assists, and 1 stock per game last year. shot 41.5% from the field, 31.5% from three, 83.7% from the free throw line. That said, that lower 3-point number, he's a career 35% 3-point shooter on 6 attempts so far in his career. So hopefully last year's lower number was kind of just from playing on a not very good team in Atlanta, a team that kind of bottomed out, honestly. And, obviously wound up winning the draft lottery. They weren't quite that bad. They jumped quite a bit to get there, but, that obviously was not a functional team last year. So maybe there's a decent chance he gets more money from maybe one of the tanking teams. Maybe San Antonio throws him some money. Maybe Detroit wants to get him in, although they've already given up on him once. So tough to think that, they would end up spending that kind of money. But maybe like Utah, who just kind of goes after shooters and whatever generally, maybe goes for him. But if he decides that he ultimately wants to, go for like a winning team and potentially carve out a role with a team that has something to play for, maybe he goes for the Knicks. And that I wouldn't fault him if he wants to do that, because he's a good shooter, whatever. Like, could potentially, if he signs this deal for 2 seasons, making $5 million a season, then by the time that deal is up, then maybe he's able to hit free agency, and maybe he's been part of a playoff run or something, and that's enough to get some team with him entering his prime to be like, let's give this guy $12 million a season or something like that. So who knows? But I think if you gave him that full 2-year taxpayers mid-level exception, maybe he gets a bigger deal in 2 years, and maybe he's able to find minutes. I guess the difficulty would be finding those minutes. He plays sort of like a tweener wing position, where he's like sort of a small forward, sort of a power forward. I don't think he's particularly great on defense, which would maybe harm him a bit on this team. But maybe if you throw him out there and he's, if you expand out to a 10-man rotation, and you could go with like Deuce McBride, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Saddiq Bey, and Precious Achiuwa, or, whoever you have as your backup center, then maybe that's a solid lineup. Or maybe he just even finds a way to get a few minutes here and there, even if it's still a 9-man rotation. Although I think that would be pretty tough, because then that would mean that the Knicks are basically playing small outside of Mitch's minutes, and I don't see that happening. I think they will have another center roster that they're going to play, and I don't think that he's going to supplant any of Deuce, Dante, or Josh Hart anytime soon. So I don't know. It would be an interesting fit, though. I think that he definitely, I think a lot of NBA teams, I would think, would want him on their team, and he just hasn't gotten that interest yet. Then he got this one, maybe it'll be a little polarizing. I feel like some people like this, some people hate it. But Patrick Beverley, I think, is sort of a perfect mentor for Deuce in a lot of ways. He's never been like a true point guard, quote unquote, but he shoots the 3 well, defends his butt off, can bring the ball down the floor well enough to initiate offense or whatever, and potentially hand it off to like a more volatile playmaker, or, play finisher, I guess. But maybe his personality isn't for everyone too. I know he goes on podcasts sometimes and likes to talk sideways, and it doesn't always rub everybody the right way. But I think he's always kind of struck me as a guy that would be way more fun to have on my team than to have on an opposing team. Like, he just seems like a bulldog. He seems like he's passionate. And I think if he was on a team that really had something to play for, he would play hard, and he would motivate in practice, and he would mentor the young players, would mentor Deuce McBride, would hopefully impart some good stuff on him, and I think that would be solid. I also think his roommate's guest spot would be sick with Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson, so maybe that's a big selling point too. But yeah, as we saw last year, I think it's just good to have a lot of quality depth, and I think he would definitely be good for that. So hopefully he's a guy that the Knicks maybe consider, but if not, I think I've got some other names that could be worth looking at as well. So get into another 3-and-D guy, a sort of project guard, but sort of not project guard, former number 1 pick. So interesting candidate there. And a couple other guys when we get into it next segment. But first, I got to remind you all that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. And Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So I'm not even gonna, this says to pick out a specific matchup. I'm not even gonna pick a specific one. The Mets stink again. The Grimace era seems to be over. So it seems like the Yankees kind of stink too. But if you just want to go to a game and just have a really good time, I always think Citi Field's the way to go. Go there, get in cheap on the Game Time app, go in and slide in for as little as you possibly can. Then just go save, use all that saved money, go buy some food. The food is so good. I freaking love the food at Citi Field. So, I can't advocate for the baseball right now, but I could definitely advocate for the food. And tell you what, you can get some last minute deals. You could save up to 60% off buying tickets last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Or you can get flash deals. You could save even more with exclusive in-app deals on certain seats ahead of the game or event, or zone deals. Just save more when you just choose a section and let Game Time pick your seat for you. Trust me, at Citi Field, just pick one of the nosebleeds and then just wander the field, wander all around, all around the stadium. It's a lot more fun that way. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, and I'm back in to keep going through mid-level exception candidates with that taxpayer mid-level exception. And these are mostly going to be like vets, but there's some kind of, younger vets, I guess, that could potentially fall in this category. And hopefully I found all the good ones. But if I missed any names, certainly. And if you're here like on YouTube and you want to leave a comment or whatever, let me know. And maybe it's someone that I can discuss, or Gavin and I can discuss in a future episode. But the next candidate I want to say was Jay Crowder. And, I think sort of like Pat Bev, he's getting a little long in the tooth, but I think he can still play. I think he can still shoot. He shot 35% last year, which matches his career average, but generally he's been closer to 40% in recent years. So I think that was actually a little low for him, and he could potentially do better. He could play a little backup 4 from time to time. That would give Josh Hart a rest. And he's not a great offensive rebounder, but I think he's a pretty solid defensive rebounder. Like, his defensive rebound percentage is good. It's around 15% for his career, which, wouldn't be great if he was a center. Like, you want to see that over 20 if you're a center, but 15% for a guy who could play like the 3-4, pretty solid. So I think he could be pretty good that way. I think you could explain away the offensive rebounding too by the fact that he's often on the perimeter trying to shoot or space the floor. So that's kind of part of that. But I think he would fit pretty well with the ethos of this team too. I think he's got that sort of like dog mentality. I think he's a get up in your face and defend kind of guy. He's a, don't take any crap kind of guy for the most part. So I think he'd be a good fit, just in terms of what he brings to the table. I think he's kind of a guy that can fit on a lot of different teams in the NBA. So, I think for a team like the Knicks that's looking to take that next step and hopefully become more of a contender this year would be pretty solid. Then you got Markelle Fultz, I think, is another name worth looking at for the Knicks here. If he just continues not getting signed, and that's the thing, maybe he's a guy that the Jazz take a chance on or something, or maybe OKC wants him just for extra depth or whatever, and he's willing to take $8 million or whatever. Maybe San Antonio looks at him as like, hey, maybe you and Wemby would be good. Let's throw you like $10 million or something like that. But former number 1 overall pick, cannot shoot, full stop. He cannot shoot the 3. And it's just never going to happen for him, unfortunately. Whatever happened to him early in his career where his form just got absolutely destroyed, never got better. I mean, his form is just still so ugly. He can't shoot threes. He can't really do free throws that well. It's kind of a problem for a point guard. But driving, still really good. Passing, still really good. Defending, still really good. So, I think if he's just a guy that you're relying on for 15 minutes behind Jalen Brunson every game to just kind of come in and be that backup point guard, he could be pretty solid. And I think that he and Deuce would make a really nice defensive pairing off the bench. And I think that he would be a little better to be the sort of main ball handler with Deuce. If you have those two out there together, you got to Fultz handle it more, let Deuce just kind of do what he does best, which is the spot up 3-point shooting, more so than the initiating. And then, Fultz can get to the rim and, finish that way and hopefully, not harm you too much with the shooting because there would be other shooters coming in off the bench like Dante DiVincenzo. And, I think that can be solid. But an interesting stat that I found, it was a small sample, but the Magic were way better with him on than off in the playoffs this year. They were plus 18 in like 100 something minutes that he played, plus 18 per 100 possessions, I should say. So, I mean, that's really solid. That's like big time impact that he was having out there. So, maybe that says the defense will play with him, and the 3-point shooting won't harm you that much, as long as you can have other shooters out there. So, which I think the Knicks could definitely do. So I think he would definitely be worth potentially investing with that Taxpayers mid-level. He did kind of see his role take a hit in Orlando this year. I think that has a lot to do with Anthony Black coming aboard as a rookie. And, I think he could fit with the Knicks. I think it'd be good. You just don't want to extend his role too much. You don't want to put too much on him, but he's a good insurance policy to have around. If Brunson has to miss a game or two, I think he could fill in and be admirable as that like starting point guard. And otherwise, just as a bench guy for 10 to 15 minutes a game, I think he could do a lot worse. So definitely a guy I would be looking at. Then another guy that I find pretty intriguing, Talen Horton-Tucker. So he's intriguing. He's like a long guard, but he's built pretty big. Like he's got a really long wingspan as well. So he's like 6'4", but I didn't look it up, but I remember at draft time, he had something like a 6'10" or 6'11", maybe even pushed towards 7-foot wingspan, which is crazy for a guy that size, but he definitely struggles shooting. I think that's the main thing with him that needs to be fixed. Shot just under 40% from the field last year, 33% from three, 81% from the free throw line. And that constitutes his best year from three, 33%. That's his best year so far in his career. He did shoot 62% at the rim, though, per Basketball Reference, which isn't half bad, but he shot pretty bad from 3 to 10 feet. So like floater range and like right at the rim stuff, he shot 40.7%. So I don't totally love that either. And he took about double the attempts, or maybe not quite double, but close, from that 3 to 10 range versus just at the rim, which again, you'd rather see someone get all the way to the rim. So it could be an interesting case study, though. I think, if you had him coming in off the bench, he could be the guy to kind of handle the ball and then alleviate that responsibility from Deuce and Dante and Josh Hart. But he's long and bulky enough to hopefully guard up to like threes or maybe even small fours. So it could give you that sort of weird, offensively, he could be sort of your point guard, but defensively could be a wing defender, which I think could be useful. So definitely got to be interested in, if I were the Knicks, to just kind of, be a decent experiment and a guy who still has some meat on the bone, I think, for his development. So, but I've got a couple more veteran names coming up to close this show, to finish off Taxpayer mid-level exception candidates. So that's coming up in just a second. All right, and I'm back in to keep talking through some names, and let's start with a familiar one here for the Taxpayer mid-level exception, Doug McDermott. I think it's pretty straightforward with him. He's an older guy now. He's pretty long in the tooth in his career, but good shooter. Obviously, he's been there, done that with the Knicks. He came over in the Melo deal from Oklahoma City along with Enes Kanter, and has had a better go of it for his career since then than Kanter did. And obviously came over with the pick that became Mitchell Robinson too. So, Mitch has had a good go of it. But it was with the Knicks in 2017-18, just for half a season with the Knicks before eventually getting traded as part of the Emmanuel Mudiay trade. But he shot 41% or better from three in 6 of the last 7 seasons. So, I mean, he is a bona fide shooter. What else he can do at this point? Maybe limited. I doubt that you can probably rely on him as much for the backdoor cuts that he and Kyle O'Quinn made famous back in that one half of a 2017-18 season, where Kyle O'Quinn was so good at hitting Dougie McBuckets on those backdoor cuts. But just if you want another shooter to just have on the bench, I think you could do a lot worse than Doug McDermott. And I don't know he might not even be a guy you have to spend that mid-level exception on. He's made that sort of money in his career before. Obviously, made that right after he left the Knicks and all that, but I don't I don't think he's really clearly he's not garnering many offers at this point because he's still on the market, after the moratorium and, is still waiting to find his team for next year. So maybe he's a guy that you can even entice to just come for a minimum. But if you have to spend like part of the mid-level exception, then you want to save part of it for later in the season or whatever. If another slightly more than minimum player comes up that you want to sign, maybe you could do that with McDermott. But yeah, I would like the fit. I think you can never have too much shooting. I think that's like the universal rule of the NBA now. So I would definitely look at him if I were the Knicks. Then we got Gary Trent Jr., which if we're talking about shooting, I mean, he's shooting, man. I mean, he is a shooter. I really think it's unlikely that his market even gets this far down, which is why I kind of buried him. Like if I was confident that the Knicks could sign him for $5 million, I'd be like, why don't you do that right now? Because he's really good. He's definitely better than $5 million good. I don't know if he was $18 million good, which is what he was making last year, and what his last contract was paying him. But I think he's easily a $10 to $12 million player, if not slightly more than that. So, but if his market really tanks, then whatever, we can speculate. He's not signed yet, so there's a chance he could still sign with the Knicks. He did have a little bit of a down year overall scoring, but still just absolutely killed it from three. And he's a almost 40% shooter from deep for his career. And is, I think still really good, from three, and just a guy that you can count on to always get you around like 40%. So I could see a world where you could have a 5-man lineup of like Deuce, Gary Trent Jr., Dante, Josh Hart, and Precious Achiuwa off the bench that just absolutely wreaks havoc if the Knicks would extend the rotation out to 10. I mean, maybe you're still hurting a little bit for that true like backup ball handler, and it's kind of just by committee of Dante and Deuce McBride bringing it down, and maybe Josh Hart from time to time. But like shooting wise, you're cooking with gas there. I think that would just be absolutely insane. So yeah, if he becomes available, I mean, you talk about adding championship level depth where you could have a guy that's that talented potentially be like your 10th man. That would be a huge coup for the Knicks if they were able to do that. And then the last name I almost feel dirty saying, which is why I buried him all the way down here, but he said some very disparaging things about the Knicks over the years, and for that I do not like him. But I think just from a talent perspective and what he could potentially bring to the table, Spencer Dinwiddie is worth exploring if you're the Knicks. So he was a big plus when he was on the court for both the Nets and the Lakers last year, especially the Lakers. They were 8 points better with him on the court per 100 possessions per Basketball Reference, which that's a pretty big deal on a team that, I mean, that's not a nobody team. That was a team that was playing for play-in positioning and, and playoff positioning. And he got there and, in a loaded West on a good team that finished, I think, almost 10 games over 500, if not 10 games over 500. He came in and made a big impact like right away. He's a good player. I mean, there's no way to say it. He provides positive impact. He also provides lots of cornball takes and NFT investments and stuff too. But just on the basketball court, he's definitely worth having around. He shot almost 40% from three with the Lakers as well, which is a huge selling point. And his assist percentage is generally really high too. It fell off with the Lakers. It was only about 12% with them, but generally he's like 25 to 30% assist percentage. So clearly a guy that can initiate, can set others up, and, just set the table and, be a good initiator for your team. Even if, I mean, anecdotally, when I've watched him, sometimes I've felt sometimes he weirdly seems a little too shoot happy. But maybe that's just the games against the Knicks. Maybe he was just kind of more like that against them because again, the assist percentage bears out that he moves the ball pretty well and he finds guys for assists pretty often. So definitely a guy worth looking at. But that said, he's accustomed to making a pretty decent sum of money too, similar to like Gary Trent, where I'm like, I don't know, this is a dude that's been making like $15 to $18 million a year, a lot of years. Obviously made a minimum contract with the Lakers once he got cut, but that was only because he got bought out after he got dealt away from the Nets. So it's like, I don't know. I kind of think maybe if his market dries up, maybe the Knicks are a team that he looks at and says, I think this is a team where I could have a role backing up Jalen Brunson. Maybe he would also kind of scoff at the idea of being like a 15-minute backup behind Brunson. And maybe he also still hasn't gotten over all the things he said about the Knicks when he was with the Nets or whatever. So I guess we'll see, whether he would be willing to take that step and if the Knicks would even be on his list of destinations he would want to go to. But if he's willing to take like $5 million, if I'm the Knicks, I'd probably sign him up for it. I think that would be a good, again, that's like championship level depth behind, if he's your guy behind Jalen Brunson and he could step up as there's an injury or whatever. And, it's a lot of talent to have on this team. So definitely a guy I would look at if he's in the Knicks price range, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll have some clarity on who the Knicks are looking to sign soon. And then we can get into some actual scouting of these guys. But until then, thank you all for listening. And Summer League coming up the end of this week. So keep your eyes out for that. We'll definitely have some coverage on that for you, as well as maybe some other discussions with some of our other Locked On hosts. But until next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out.